Okay, year 11, I think a few things need to be clarified. I kind of went away at the end of last lesson and I still don't think you guys have all got this. So I've put together this really small video tutorial which will hopefully help you. So we had a look at Muhammad. I told you a story. Last lesson we recapped. Who was Muhammad? He was the final prophet. What does that mean? Well, for the Islamic tradition, they recognize that throughout history, a lot of people have had some kind of divine revelation or have been in contact with Allah, but Muhammad was the most important, and that's why we call him the final prophet. So Muhammad is regarded as the final prophet, and he did a lot of really interesting things in his life. We had a look at that. You guys all have the timeline which map all the different things that happened to Muhammad and the different things that he did. We know what the climate, the political climate and the social climate were at the time of Muhammad. So he was in Saudi Arabia. This is what the economy looked like. These are the kind of people who were around. These were the religion that they followed. So we have all this prior knowledge. Now what we need to do is look at how Muhammad is, or look at Muhammad as a role model for Islamic life. So looking at Muhammad as a model of Islamic life. And that's what I'm just going to clarify today in this tutorial. So what is a role model? Okay, this might seem obvious, but it seemed like a good place to start. A role model is a person who is looked up to by others as an example to be imitated. So when we're looking at Muhammad, we're looking at him as an example for other Muslim people to imitate through either his actions or his decisions. These are the things we're going to examine. So that's what a role model is. This is where we're going. Before we jump straight into looking at Muhammad, it's a good idea to look at a little bit of what Islam is. If you're looking at a person who is a model or whose example needs to be imitated by people, you first need to look at, well, what exactly are they trying to imitate? Okay? And Islam, at its essence, the word Islam, comes from an Arabic meaning to submit or surrender. Okay, so it is the goal for all Muslims to submit to Allah. So when we're looking at a role model or a model for Islamic life within the tradition of Islam, we're obviously looking for a person who is not only a great leader and has really good leadership qualities, we're also looking for a person or looking at a person and examining circumstances whereby which they submit to the will of Allah. Now, that submission will look different in different circumstances, and that's what we're about to look at. We're going to look and see, firstly, was Muhammad a good leader? Yes or no? Why? Why could he be a model for Islamic life? And secondly, did he submit to the will of Allah? And what are circumstances that could back up our point for or against? Okay, so let's have a look at Muhammad. So when examining Muhammad as a model for Islamic life, not only do we have to look generally in terms of what made him a good leader, what makes him generally a good model, how could people relate to him, we also have to look at Muhammad and circumstances whereby which he submitted to the will of Allah. Because, hey, that's the goal of Islam, submitting to the will of Allah. So I've listed on here, this is not all of them, I've just taken random ideas from the timeline. I've listed general things like married an older woman, came from a poor family. I've listed characteristics like good speaker, confident. I've listed things trusted by all those around him. Then I've listed specific events. Was shepherd but became merchant. Then I've listed specific events, appeared to by the angel Jibril. He had 2 revelations that were important. He preached the message of Allah around Mecca. He travelled to Yathrib, which was later known as Medina. Okay, later became known as Medina. And he started a new city to follow Allah. He formed a new constitution. He made treaties with Jewish people in order to keep everyone happy. Then when when his followers were being persecuted, he defended them against violence with the 3 battles. This is not everything, but these are some key ideas that came from the story of the Prophet Muhammad. What you are required to do is take all of this wealth of information that's all in front of you and pick things out and say, well, Muhammad could be considered a model for Islamic life because he's someone who was good in both his words and his actions. He was a confident speaker, but he also instilled confidence in his followers, if you can find an example. He was trusted by all those around him. That was a very important leadership quality. He came from a poor family. There's this idea in Islam, one of the key ideas of Islam is submitting to Allah by giving to the poor. So he's coming from a poor family makes him easily relatable. Submitting to the will of Allah is not always an easy thing. So sometimes some of those activities that we did with the submission scenarios, they weren't always easy. But you did them anyway because you knew that you were surrendering to my will. So Muhammad didn't necessarily, as we've learnt, want to go out and preach. He spent a long time reflecting. And it wasn't until the angel Jibril appeared to him again that he went out and preached. He preached the word of Allah in the face of adversity. That was the phrase I used last lesson. So he preached the will of Allah in a time where he was actually physically being persecuted. So threats of violence against him and his followers were carried out. He traveled in a very dangerous manner. So that he made a journey from Mecca all the way to Medina. Very, very dangerous. However, he did it because it was submitting to the will of Allah. You have to look at all of these circumstances in his life and say, why would that be a good thing why would Muslim people want to imitate that behavior? Why would they? Why could that potentially make Muhammad a model for Islamic life? I hope that clarifies a few things for you. What I want you guys to do is I want you to have a look at that sheet. I've scaffolded a whole lot of questions. Now, they don't necessarily relate to the information directly above them, but they're more sequential. They're more to get you to start thinking, okay, why is it important that he's human? What are circumstances, whereby which he's submitting to the will of Allah? They're sequential. They're not necessarily directly about the things above them. So I know I talk about the hadith and the sunnah. Okay, they're not directly about hadith and sunnah, but it's trying to get you to appreciate and examine Muhammad as a role model for Islamic life. Okay, good luck, guys. I will see you next lesson.